So, what did Jesus have to say about homosexuality or the subject of so-called gay marriage? Now, it seems to me that in the past, whenever the subject of homosexuality came up, Christians would primarily resort to Old Testament passages like Leviticus 18:22 that tells us that a man is not to lie with another man as he does with a woman. And of course, those who don't agree with us would immediately respond by saying, yes, but there are also other Bible verses in the Old Testament as well that tell us that we are not allowed to eat pork or catfish or to cut the hair on the side of our heads or to wear clothing of mixed fibers. But the problem is that they have forgotten that there is a clear difference between civil, ceremonial, and dietary laws of the Old Testament and the moral law. As far as the civil, the ceremonial types of laws, the Bible clearly tells us that we are no longer obligated to follow them because Christ has fulfilled them. So those Old Testament ceremonial laws were for Jewish people, and we are not Jewish, never claimed to be, so they don't apply to us. However, the moral law does still apply because the moral law was again affirmed very clearly by the apostles and by Jesus himself throughout the New Testament writings. However, Christians finally got a little bit smarter so they could avoid the whole catfish argument and all that silly stuff. They began to realize that maybe we best to quote from New Testament verses, and there are a lot of New Testament verses that make clear reference to the subject of homosexuality, and in particular, forbid it as a practice and state that it is a sin. For example, 1 Timothy 1:10, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9, Jude chapter 1, verse 7, Romans chapter 1 verses 26 through 27, and Ephesians chapter 5 verse 31. Again, those who disagreed with us would respond by saying, yes, but what did Jesus say? Now my first response is that each of those verses in the New Testament, because they're a part of the inspired Word of God, they are all equally valid in and of themselves, even if Jesus didn't say anything. But here's the most important thing. Jesus did actually have something to say about the subject of homosexuality and the subject of gay marriage more particularly. Now, I agree that when Jesus answered this question, he was talking about the subject of divorce. But in answering the question, Jesus gives us even more information that does apply to the subject of homosexuality. He states in Matthew chapter 19, verses 4 through 6, that in the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and that for this reason a man will leave his mother and father and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So very clearly he's talking, yes, about the mystical union that takes place when a couple makes that vow, makes that commitment, consummates that vow, and so forth. But he also very clearly uses the terminology of male and female, and man and wife. So when Jesus talks about marriage, he very clearly makes it known that the marriage is only between a man and a woman, and anything else is not a marriage at all.